leaving behind everything we thought we knew and diving into the unknown. This is how our investigation into fluoride started, trying to forget any preconceived ideas that we had about what we thought to be a safe product. It was in the archives of the Schneider Steelworks in Creusot that we found the first piece of evidence that confirmed our worries, a report from 1970 entitled Pollution. In the report, they talk about fluoride, a mineral used to melt steel in the tall chimneys and of toxic smoke. We saw pictures of cows with a mysterious illness, fluorosis, an illness that is apparently caused by fluoride. In the surrounding region, red puffs of smoke packed with fluoride fill the sky before falling into the fields below. Few people remember this, except for some elderly residents such as François Drozdowski, a retired labourer at the steelworks neighbouring his house.
Il y avait des bêtes, enfin des vaches charolaises, pour ainsi dire, et qui mangeaient à longueur d'année dans ces prés. Et au bout de certaines années, on s'est aperçu que les vaches étaient malades. On va dire que les bêtes crevaient, quoi. Et ça commençait par un déchaussement des dents, et puis ensuite tout ça amenait à carrément une dégradation complète de l'animal.
How could a product that appears harmless to most of us turn out to be so noxious? By aberration? Turning a blind eye? These questions formed the backbone of our investigation in several countries. France, the USA, England, Germany, the Faroe Islands. All around the world, people were sounding the alarm. But it was only in 2010 that the WHO decided to class fluoride among the 10 chemicals that pose the greatest threat to public health, alongside asbestos, arsenic, and dioxins. It becomes toxic from as little as 1 milligram per day for children and 4 milligrams for adults, and the maximum dose is easily reached given the large number of everyday products containing fluoride. What's more surprising is, mixed with carbon gas, you can find it in our frying pans, our clothes, our pizza boxes. And even at a very low dose, their toxicity is considered to be extremely concerning by scientists from around the world. One professor who knows more than most about fluoride wrote her thesis on the topic. Anne-Marie Musset heads one of the biggest dental surgery units in France.
Bonjour, c'est Rebecca. Oui, vous venez avec moi? Oui, bien sûr.
Here at the University of Strasbourg, the team often encounters cases of fluoride poisoning, and for a worrying reason.
Celui-là, alors on va là? Voilà, tu vas aller là. Alors, pour le dentifrice, qu'est-ce qu'on met comme dose, vous savez?
Enfin, moi, habituellement, je mets sur la longueur de la
brosse.
De la brosse.
Parce que c'est ce que vous avez vu. Hein?
Tout à fait.
Voilà. Alors, en fait, ce qu'il faut mettre, c'est ce qu'on appelle un petit poids. C'est pas au millimètre, hein, donc on va mettre... Voilà, vous voyez, on met une boule. Voilà. C'est pas beaucoup.
Moins que...
Hein, c'est beaucoup moins que ce que vous mettez.
Oui, moi je pensais qu'il fallait mettre...
C'est pas la peine d'en mettre plus.
Professor Musset knows why the instruction to use a pea-sized drop of toothpaste was enforced on manufacturers following a law passed in March 2009.
Toujours faire attention qu'elle avale pas, hein, surtout les plus petits. Voilà, les fluoroses qu'on voit en France, pratiquement 80% des cas, c'est des enfants qui ont avalé du dentifrice à trop forte dose.
Fluorosis, that word again. This mysterious illness that affected the cat in Creusot in the 1970s also affects humans. At very high doses, it leads to serious skeletal problems. At lower doses, it causes what is known as dental fluorosis.
Ça, c'est une fluorose typique. Alors on voit les lignes blanches, horizontales, qui sont sur toutes les dents. C'est un émail poreux qui est dégradé, qui finit par se détruire. Vous voyez, là, il y a un petit trou. Là aussi, il y a des petits trous. Et puis là, il y a des nuages blancs qui peuvent se rejoindre. Et comme cet émail est poreux, il finit par se colorer secondairement. Donc c'est une coloration brune, mais qui ne part pas, qui se met dans cette espèce de craie poreuse de l'émail.
Although fluoride is supposed to protect your teeth, when it's ingested in excess, it has the opposite effect. And the sources of fluoride intoxication are numerous. Fluoride is found in lots of everyday things. In lots of table salts, in toothpaste, in some bottled water, and even sometimes in tap water. And you can very quickly exceed the maximum recommended dose. That's why, since 2008, bottled water containing more than 1.5 milligrams of fluoride per litre are required to print on the bottle that the water is not suitable for newborns or children under 7 years old. We found 6 brands of water, almost all sparkling, that exceeded this limit.
L'idéal, c'est quand même d'emmener tous vos enfants une fois par an.
When Professor Musset sees patients and feels that it is necessary to prescribe them fluoride to prevent dental cavities, she systematically undertakes an overview of their fluoride consumption.
Qu'est-ce que vous prenez comme eau à la maison? Vous prenez l'eau du robinet ou vous prenez de l'eau pour boire?
Pour boire, non, on utilise de l'eau en bouteille.
Et vous utilisez quelle eau en bouteille?
L'eau cristalline.
La cristalline, oui, toujours la cristalline.
Oui, toujours la cristalline.
D'accord, et qu'est-ce que vous avez comme sel à la maison?
Le sel de table, hein, c'est classique.
Le sel de table iodé? Oui. Oui, vous prenez le sel qu'il y a. Oui. Vous n'avez jamais pris de sel fluoré? Non. En fait, le fluor, il agit à une dose très précise en fonction du poids de l'enfant. Si on est un peu trop bas, genre 0,7 mg, il ne sert à rien. Et si on est à 1,2, 1,3 mg, c'est trop et on a de la fluorose. Donc, il s'agit vraiment de donner exactement ce qu'il faut, ni plus ni moins. Moins, ça ne sert à rien, et plus, ça peut faire des fluoroses. Rebecca, tu me montres tes dents? Oui.
In an ideal world, all doctors would evaluate their patients' exposure to fluoride. Rebecca would dry her eyes after the scare of a visit to the dentist, would go home, and my investigation would stop there. But, as you can imagine, there's more to it than that. The study, conducted a few years ago by Professor Musset, showed that in 4 to 12-year-olds, for example, more than 40% of doctors prescribed fluoride drops without first evaluating their exposure to fluoride. And the result?
Chez ces 4-12 ans, il y avait près de la moitié, 45% des enfants, qui avaient trop d'apport de fluor. Tout d'abord parce qu'ils avaient pour 13% une prescription qui ne correspondait pas, qui était beaucoup trop importante pour leur poids et leur âge, ou alors du sel et la prescription, ou alors de l'eau, du sel et la prescription.
Why are doctors so quick to prescribe fluoride? Through ignorance? Unless they had been misled by certain industrialists. Industrialists who, 50 years ago, moved heaven and earth to promote what was at first just a cumbersome poison. It was Alcoa who first brought fluoride to fame in the 1930s. At the time, the major aluminium producer in the USA had a serious problem. They used fluoride to extract aluminium, but this process produced toxic fumes. The threat of a court case hung over them. In 1931, the company launched a discreet investigation into the cases of dental fluorosis that surrounded their manufacturing plant in Messina, in the north of the country, and reported the results in a confidential internal letter. We have questioned 3 of our local dentists on the prevalence of mottled enamel in Messina. All of the dentists stated that they have treated such cases here. This letter has been read by two men. Christopher Bryson, an investigative journalist who has spent 10 years of his life researching the subject, and Paul Cornett, an anti-fluoride activist from the United States who knows why Alcoa managed to avoid any legal proceedings due to the fluoride pollution.
The problem for industry is if your pollutant has a biomarker, it's easier to convince a jury that the company is responsible for this other damage. The dental fluorosis would not be a huge law settlement. But if you damage the person's bones, if they're arthritis or they've got bone fractures or other things like lowering thyroid function, then you're into much higher settlements. I think Alcoa knew all of that the moment that they found that fluoride was the cause of dental fluorosis.
In the aluminum factories, fluoride was a killing poison. It was causing workers all sorts of health problems. Around the aluminum factories, animals and people were being poisoned. Alcoa needed a defense against these actual lawsuits and potential lawsuits. They needed something good to say about fluoride.
Alcoa found the answer to their problem at the Mellon Institute, an applied science laboratory in Pittsburgh that the aluminium giants had created themselves in order to serve the interests of the industrialists. The institute had already been used to legitimize asbestos, for example. In 1935, a scientist named Gerald Cox was working at the institute. He was conducting a study on teeth using laboratory rats. One man came out of the shadows to approach him. He was called Francis Frary. He was the research director at Alcoa, and he strongly suggested to Cox that he should include fluoride in his study.
Here we have the chief chemist of Alcoa actually suggesting to him in his animal experiments that he look into to see whether fluoride was good for teeth. So clearly they were thinking we need to find a beneficial use for fluoride to compensate for the public's knowledge that fluoride is damaging health. They needed...
The scientist from the Mellon Institute made a mistake in admitting that his study had been influenced by Alcoa many years later in correspondence with an historian. The first time I ever gave fluoride a thought was in response to a question posed by Dr. Francis Frary, Director of Research for Alcoa. The poison had become a remedy. 4 years later, the Mellon Institute announced in a scientific journal that fluoride is the element most probably responsible for improved caries resistance.
Within a few very short years, triggered by the suggestion of Francis Frary at Alcoa, our perception of fluoride goes from poison to something that's good for teeth.
And that's how a sneaky maneuver rewrote the history of fluoride. Nobody thought to challenge it for decades. After the war, it was used in a number of products, in the drinking water of some countries, in salt, in chewing gum.
À première vue, c'est la même chose, mais ce n'est pas la même chose. Dans Fluogum, il y a du fluor.
C'est le fluor, c'est bien pour les dents.
C'est au fluor, Fluogum.
And of course, in toothpaste, creating adverts that stuck in the minds of generations. Fluoride became a friend who wished you well. Even going as far as becoming the way to find true love. It's better to laugh than to cry. France also prescribed massive amounts of fluoride to children in the form of tablets and to infants in drops to be taken from birth. Up until 2008, when Professor Goldberg and a few experts from the French Agency for the Security of Health Products asked doctors, to everyone's surprise, to go against previous practice.
On a eu une réunion avec le groupe de pédiatrie dans lesquels, quand on leur a annoncé ça, ils nous ont regardés comme si on était des zombies, comme si on était des gens qui venaient de la dernière pluie, et en leur disant « mais maintenant vous allez arrêter ».
Ce que vous voulez dire, c'est qu'on a donné ces fameuses petites gouttes là de flúor et de comprimés.
N'importe quoi, n'importe comment. Et là, c'était quand même, ça posait quand même un certain nombre de problèmes. Et les pédiatres ont usé et abusé, et les dentistes ont usé et abusé de supplémentation en fluorure.
Calling into question the quasi-religious belief in fluoride was not easy at the time, and Professor Goldberg didn't mince his words.
Mais des erreurs médicales, on en a plein. Hein? Bon,
pour vous, c'est une erreur médicale d'avoir dit que le fluor...
Je pense que c'est une erreur médicale d'avoir mis du fluor à toutes les sauces, bien sûr. Bien sûr.
But the medical profession was not the only one to be misled. Certain health authorities also showed a certain laissez-faire attitude towards this poison. On a morning like this, the Bordeaux vines were bathed in sunlight by the first rays of the day. It is so beautiful that we can almost forget that here, the ground isn't as kind as it looks. Fluoride is naturally present in the rocks beneath the earth and contaminates the water, making it higher than the recommended limits. A few years ago, a local resident sounded the alarm. A mother realized that for many years her family had drunk water that was over the recommended limit without being warned of the dangers. Her daughter had developed dental fluorosis.
J'attrapais mon pichet ou ma bouteille d'eau et puis je remplissais ma bouteille à l'eau du robinet. Et Léa était une petite fille qui buvait énormément d'eau. Donc elle avait un biberon d'eau la nuit à côté de son lit. Elle buvait que de l'eau du robinet parce qu'ici on n'est pas très soda, donc voilà, elle buvait énormément d'eau.
J'aime pas avoir des dents moches. Quand j'arrive au collège, donc je regarde souvent dans la glace.
White patches, teeth that are crumbling and stained in places. A mild stage 2 fluorosis, diagnosed by an expert.
Et là, quand tu te regardes dans la glace et que tu regardes tes dents, qu'est-ce que tu en penses?
Et que j'aime pas mes dents. Parce que elles sont... Il y a les taches qui sont pas belles, qui ressortent plus la journée, donc c'est dérangeant.
Tu vois?
Non, là.
On peut voir tes dents. Encore des petits trous là, hein, sur le côté. Hein.
Ah mais c'est moche.
Mais oui, mais t'inquiète, t'es très belle.
Non.
Si.
Non.
Si, t'es très belle.
Non.
This irreversible fluorosis is difficult for a teenager to deal with, but she avoided the worst, because around 20 studies throughout the world have shown that fluoridated water can cause neurological disabilities in children.
Tu expliques la plongée en apnée, qu'est-ce que c'est?
Ah, ok.
For a long time, the local water providers have delivered a non-compliant water supply which regularly goes over the limit of 1.5 milligrams of fluoride per litre for children. However, until 2010, the residents of the region received detailed analyses of water quality with no warnings about the level of fluoride.
Alors, j'ai gardé des vieux bilans. Et donc là, par exemple, en 2005... Donc, on avait déjà une non-conformité pour le paramètre fluor. On avait un taux à 1,97. Là, sur le bilan 2006, teneur moyenne de 0,5, donc toujours non conforme aux limites réglementaires pour le paramètre fluor.
Et ça, cette ligne, ça vous disait rien à l'époque?
Disons que pour moi, ça n'avait aucune signification particulière. D'ailleurs, le mot conforme, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? donc non conforme. 2009, toujours non-conformité. Et comme par hasard, le jour où on s'est rendu compte que ma fille avait une fluorose et qu'on a commencé à s'intéresser au sujet, donc on a fait des démarches et de suite après, on reçoit un bilan où là, il y a marqué des restrictions. Donc restrictions pour les enfants de moins de 12 ans et restrictions par rapport à la population adulte qui lorsqu'elle consomme cette eau, ne doit pas prendre de sel fluoré ou de médicaments fluorés ou de dentifrice fluoré.
Alexandra Thibault made an official complaint. According to her, the problem had been known about for years by the Regional Health Authority and the water federations.
Et donc, c'est un courrier qui date de janvier 2010, de la RS en fait. Donc, un courrier qui est pour le syndicat des eaux. Mes services vous ont demandé par courrier en date du 19 février 1999, d'étudier des solutions permettant de satisfaire aux exigences de qualité relatives aux fluorures. Donc, finalement, moi, j'étais vraiment persuadée qu'ils n'étaient pas au courant et que c'est pour ça qu'ils avaient laissé nos enfants boire cette eau. Et en fait, en recevant au fur et à mesure tous ces documents, je me suis rendu compte qu'ils savaient. Il y a une loi et la loi n'a pas été respectée. Et on a laissé nos enfants s'empoisonner avec cette eau.
Why did the Regional Health Authority, the Water Quality Police, not warn the parents in the affected areas? Why did they let children drink water that was dangerous to their health? That day, Gisèle Desjons was waiting for us and to respond to our questions. In the office of this state sanitary authority, there was a colourful poster pinned to the wall showing the areas with high concentrations of fluoride. Gisèle Desjons had also prepared a pile of documents. Everything seemed clear, but on my computer I had documents saved by Alexandra Thibault showing that there were no warnings until 2010.
Comment on peut expliquer que sur les bilans 2005, là par exemple celui-là, alors, donc là on voit teneur moyenne 1,97, teneur en fluor non conforme. Conclusion sanitaire, vous mettez non conforme aux limites réglementaires paramètres fluor. Mais il n'est rien dit de plus. 2006, il n'y a pas de recommandation non plus. 2007, il n'y en a pas non plus. 2008, il n'y en a pas. C'est toujours non conforme, mais il n'y a pas de recommandation. Donc là, on est d'accord que la mairie aurait dû, ou le syndicat des eaux, alarmer quand même les gens, ou mettre quelque chose à la mairie, ou comment ils peuvent savoir? Moi, je vous dis non conforme en fluor, je ne sais pas ce que ça veut dire.
Elle est non conforme. Donc on peut se poser des questions sur le fait de la consommer si elle est non conforme.
So that's the thing. The water police were distributing non-compliant water and the population had to guess that it wasn't suitable for drinking. Gisèle Desjons ended up admitting this lack of information.
Donc c'est aux gens, à la population de chercher.
Écoutez, je pense que l'information, que ce soit dans ce domaine ou dans tous les domaines, elle a bien évolué.
Ça n'était pas forcément
parce
avant.
qu'on avait ce type de consignes à cette époque-là, il fallait être simple dans nos conclusions. Donc on restait sur quelque chose de simple, effectivement, qui n'était pas forcément complet.
Why did the Regional Health Authority not insist that the water syndicates provide a compliant water supply? Are my questions legitimate or exasperating? Both, it seems.
J'avais une question sur une lettre que vous avez envoyée en 2010. Et là, on voit quand même où vous dites... Mes services vous ont demandé par courrier en date du 19 février 1999 de faire quelque chose. Pourquoi il n'y a pas de mise en demeure vraiment du gendarme de l'eau, enfin DAS à l'époque, ARS aujourd'hui, en disant ça va pas, on vous a envoyé un courrier en 99, on est, imaginons, en 2003, vous faites quoi?
Alors c'était un courrier qui était léger à l'époque, mais qui effectivement mettait l'accent sur le fait qu'il y avait de l'eau déjà avec des dépassements de fluor, et qu'il fallait faire le nécessaire pour reconquérir la qualité de l'eau, effectivement.
Mais c'était pas assez fort, la preuve, ça n'a pas marché.
Ben, ça va marcher.
Absolutely, but it took 17 years of waiting. In June 2016, a defluorization plant was constructed in Margaux. As for the rest of France, according to the health minister, non-compliant water with excessive amounts of fluoride had been distributed at least once in 22 regions. This drink that we trust, that we drink more than anything else, was not the only thing that surprised us. It's well known that the English like to do things differently to other countries. That's why two researchers at the University of Derby decided to go against tradition and take a look at a British institution, tea.
We've got pots for our pots. Whoa. This is a black blend. This is a pure blend. This comes from a single location. And the economy blend, and that's the ones which we had found a high level of fluoride in.
Is tea good for our health? That was the question until the two researchers showed that tea contained high levels of fluoride. For their study, Paul Lynch and Aradhana Mehra studied around 30 different brands of tea with a fine tooth comb to look at their exact amount of fluoride. The results were surprising. 6 out of 10 teas contained more than 4 milligrams of fluoride per adult per day, this famous limit beyond which our health is at risk.
What we found was that pure blended teas had around between 1 and 2 milligrams per litre of fluoride. The oolong, again, while the pure blends had a slightly lower but comparable value. The black blends, which from the main big commercial brands, they were around 3 to 4 milligrams per litre of fluoride. The green teas were very comparable, but the economic blends were significantly higher. They were ranged from between about 5 up to 8 in some cases.
But how does fluoride make its way into our teas? A quick demonstration is better than a long explanation.
So here is a tea bag which I've opened, which is from economy tea. I'm going to weigh 2 grams and add 100 milliliters of water to it. I'll first stir it, and you can already see that you're getting a cup of tea from this. This time the fluoride from the tea is coming out into the water. In 2 minutes you can get a majority, most of the fluoride will come out into the infusion in 2 minutes' time. And very, very, very little.
2 minutes is all we need to exceed the toxic limits of fluoride.
For this sample, it is showing me that it has got 7 milligrams per litre, which is very high because you can get more than the required fluoride of your daily intake just by drinking 3 mugs of tea. So you can get up to 150% of your daily requirement just through that economy tea in terms of the 3 mugs.
If, like me, you are wondering why the economy tea contains more fluoride than the others, we have to follow Aradhana Mehra into the university greenhouses. This is where she keeps the tea plants that are able to absorb fluoride from the ground.
The tea that is collected for consumption or for use for the tea is the top bud and the bud and the top 2 leaves. And this is the tea which makes good quality tea. It is collected and picked by hand. On the other hand, if you are going to use the lower tea leaves, they are going to be more mature and they will have more fluoride in it. So to make economy teas, you might even have mechanical harvesting, and therefore tea is just collected like that from the top, which will obviously not only include the top bud and the 2 leaves, but other mature leaves as well. And all of that, when it is processed and ground, that becomes your economy tea that we buy from the supermarket, and therefore it's got a high load of fluoride in it.
In English and American tea drinkers, a handful of studies have shown cases of skeletal fluorosis, a disease where fluoride takes the place of calcium. The bones become fragile and break with no reason.
I think that they don't think it's bad for health. I think it's one of those things which is very neutral, that people drink it, they think it's a safe product. Absolutely. But I think, like so many other things in our lives, if you drink too much tea, if you drink tea to excess, it will be dangerous.
Drink less tea. Ban certain types of water, some types of salt. After all, it doesn't seem that difficult to get rid of fluoride, right? But it's not going to be beaten that easily. All over the planet, there is a chemical product that is omnipresent and which nobody can escape from. A compound that causes illnesses much more severe than fluorosis.
PFC compounds are chemicals that are used to make outdoor gear waterproof. Many manufacturers of weatherproof jackets, trousers and shoes use PFCs to make their products more water repellent.
Here is our old friend hiding under a new name, PFCs or perfluorocarbons. Greenpeace sounded the alarm. Associated with carbon and chemically modified, fluoride becomes extremely dangerous. Scientists from Greenpeace went to every corner of the globe to take samples and found PFCs even in the furthest reaches. A chemical compound created in factories spread around the world.
During production, those tiny particles not only end up in nearby bodies of water, but are dispersed across the globe as gases or fine particulate matter. They travel with the wind and eventually drift back to Earth.
These days, PFCs are rattling the scientific world. In 2013, they were identified as being priority dangerous substances by Europe.
These compounds, they are accumulated. That means they stay in your body, they go into the organs like kidneys or liver, and stay there for several years, 2.5 years to up to 9 years, they stay in your body.
This ex-chemist has made PFC his pet hate. Since he joined Greenpeace in Germany, Manfred Zanten has worked tirelessly to track down what are known as perfluorinates compounds.
Den Schlafsack, bitte.
Because PFCs are hidden in many of our daily household items, Manfred Zanten has undertaken an in-depth investigation.
Dann nimm mal die Schuhe, bitte.
A few weeks ago, he bought a large variety of products from around the world in order to test them in his laboratory.
We have a collection here. We have, for example, a backpack. This could be impregnated with PFC, and a sleeping bag that could contain PFC. We have a shoe over here. And we also have, for example, pizza boxes that could contain PFC inside to make it easier to get the pizza out, so that it does not attach to the paper, to the box.
Yeah.
That is the only reason, of course. We have some muffin paper baking molds that can contain PFC to make them for oil and fat resistant or repellent. And we have some microwave popcorn packaging could contain PFC.
What do they use it so in the sleeping bag, for example?
Good question. I don't know. Makes no sense. Water repellent in the sleeping bag is not needed because you will not sleep in the rain with the bag, so always inside. You don't need PFC in sleeping bags. And you don't know if it is a health risk or not. You don't know exactly, because if you sleep in that bag and sweating or something like that, or it's very hot in summertime, for example, and the PFC are in the tent, they can evaporate and then you breathe them. So this is not necessary.
Does the compound evaporate? Is it absorbed into food? Scientists are investigating these unanswered questions. But one thing has already been proved. The manufacturing and the use of perfluorated compounds in factories around the world have serious consequences for our health. We had never imagined how many kilometers we would travel in order to conduct our investigation. So one day, I found myself in deepest West Virginia, following the tracks of perfluorated compounds in Paul Brooks's brand new pickup. The doctor wished to show me around Parkersburg and talk to me about a subject that haunts the inhabitants of this small town in Eastern America. Here, everyone knows about PHCs. Perfluorated compounds are the main products of a plant in the region.
That's the plant right there, okay? For years, they pumped that stuff into the river. They called it poop, human feces. They said, we pooped into the river. That was in their documents, in their own corporate documents.
Here is the plant that had secretly defecated into the river. Welcome to the biggest production site in the world, owned by DuPont de Nemours, a legend of the chemical industry who invented Teflon thanks to PFCs.
Even burned food won't stick to Teflon, so it's always easy to clean. If it has DuPont, Teflon.
Let me tell you a story. Because behind the commercial attractions of a non-stick pan hides a tragedy. To produce Teflon, for over 50 years, DuPont used a particular perfluorated compound, PFOA or C8, creating toxic smoke, contaminating all the local water sources and the drinking water of the entire region.
If you look at the science, it takes a very, very small amount of C8 to cause a problem, okay? And remember, C8 has a half-life of about 4 years in the body.
Unfortunately, it's Parkersburg's history that allows us to understand the impact of PFCs on our health. A living laboratory for all the inhabitants of the planet who, without being aware of it, drink and breathe perfluorated compounds. In the region, the drinking water was heavily contaminated. More and more inhabitants became ill. In 2005, 70,000 people had their blood analyzed. The study showed that PFOA was present in their blood, often at a high dose.
So I take probably, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 pills a day.
16 years ago, Earl Botkin's life changed forever. One by one, the different diagnoses piled up. Thyroid problems, high cholesterol, and worst of all, ulcerous colitis. This disease, similar to Crohn's disease, has made his life hell. The medics suggest removing his colon, but Earl cannot make up his mind. So he eats almost nothing during the day so that he isn't bothered whilst at work.
Usually I just have some toast, and I'll drink a little bit of coffee and maybe something cold. I don't drink much orange juice because of the acid in it, but I usually have about 3 or 4 trips to the bathroom before I leave in the morning.
Every day is torture. Eating anything leaves him indisposed.
I just have a snack sometime during the day, some crackers or something to that effect, but the only real meal I have is one in the evening.
For a long time, Earl just thought it was bad luck. The illnesses had probably just happened by chance. It took his wife, Gwen, some time to make the link. The DuPont trial started to make the headlines, but the plant was 70 kilometers away from them. It was so far away. It couldn't be that. Until 2005, when the couple received a letter.
They came out with a thing, I don't know exactly how many years ago, where you go down for the screening and they'd pay you $400 a person or something to go get the blood work. And everybody, I think, in the community went down, participated in it. A lot of people did because they were going to pay them, you know. We had no idea what would come out of it, but anyway, so we went through the first testing and the second testing.
Gwen and Earl had in fact joined a study of 70,000 inhabitants in the region. The largest scientific study on the effect of PFOA on humans was conducted by 3 epidemiologists from reputable English and American universities. In 2012, David Savitz and his colleagues published their results. They were unequivocal.
Our assignment was to judge whether there was a probable link between exposure to PFOA and disease. There were 5 diseases where we did judge the evidence as indicating a link between exposure and a health problem. And those included heart disease, the various forms of, we weren't able to be more specific, but various forms of heart disease, kidney cancer, testicular cancer, thyroid disease, ulcerative colitis, and a disease of the intestines, and preeclampsia, which is hypertension during pregnancy.
I love you.
Hey.
Hi, Early.
Hey, babe. Okay, how you doing?
Doing good.
What you into?
Oh, I've been looking at pictures, and we've got so many that need put in albums. It's awful.
Earl and Gwen joined a collective lawsuit against DuPont de Nemours, as if in retribution for the theft of the wonderful life they'd had before Earl got ill. Gwen says that she lives in the moment and refuses to think about the future. Her husband, however, sees the future as a tragicomedy.
I'll continue taking drugs. One of these days my heart will go away. Gwen will live to be 120.
I'm going to live to be 125.
Yeah.
Where'd you get 120?
And she'll have 2 or 3 other guys drinking beer on my refrigerator.
Yeah, right.
But,
you can eliminate all that.
I don't know. You can't dwell on it all the time because it would keep you messed up.
It would keep you angry. You'd be mad, you know.
It'll keep you depressed. Yeah. DuPont knew what they were doing with criminal charges because I get mad and I get upset with them.
Yes, DuPont knew about the dangers of PFC and had done for a while.
We are now prepared to destroy more rapidly and completely every productive enterprise the Japanese have in any city.
In 1945, the USA had just dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. A few years before, the Manhattan Project had been launched, a secret defense mission to construct factories throughout the country to produce the bomb. Engineers found a way to enrich uranium thanks to fluoride, an extremely corrosive substance which needed the precious input of industrialists, DuPont and their PFC-based Teflon.
Fluoride was essential in manufacturing the uranium atomic bomb. Giant, huge quantities of fluoride were mixed with uranium in a gas called uranium hexafluoride, and that gas was used to separate the explosive fraction of uranium from the non-explosive fraction. They required trucks and tankers which could resist the corrosive power of the fluoride gases. The one thing that they found that would protect steel from corrosive fluoride influence was Teflon. Teflon was something that DuPont had an expertise in manufacturing. So DuPont's expertise in fluoride was really the secret weapon that allowed the United States to build the atomic bomb.
DuPont had in fact invented Teflon in its Jackson laboratory a few years earlier. Their employees worked secretly for the Manhattan Project. But serious medical problems started appearing wherever the perfluorinated compounds were handled. In this recently declassified document from November 1944, sent to Colonel Warren, the leader of the Manhattan Project, the Army worries that the affair would be divulged. Some of these men were definitely undesirable workers on this particular project. They have spread the word that transfer to these areas is more or less an exile to Devil's Island.
Labor organizers and workers were agitating because of how many injuries there had been and how scared the workers were of handling these manifestly dangerous chemicals. There were deaths, there were terrible burns, there were exposures on a very large scale. DuPont were well aware of how poisonous the chemicals were that they were using during World War II.
Since then, a lot of water has passed under the bridge, and Teflon has become a beloved household name. And then one day, studies showed that cooking pans let out toxic fumes at high temperatures. Yes, PFCs are everywhere, in our pans, our duvets, our carpets, in the air, in our water. According to a study by the American health authorities, 98% of Americans have perfluorinated compounds in their blood. And you don't need to live next to a factory to be contaminated. The proof can be found in a country that should be free of all pollution in a corner of paradise. It is probably one of the most sumptuous places on the planet, these lost islands between the Norwegian Sea and the North Atlantic Ocean, the Faroe Islands. Life here would be peaceful if scientists had not found PFC in the blood of most of the residents of the archipelago, including the children. Over 5 years, this scientist studied the blood of 650 children on the island. Paul Weyer discovered a manner of contamination that he had never suspected.
Our surprise was that breastfeeding was so important for the actual concentration of PFC in the child. That breastfeeding was a main contributor to the PFC concentration in these small children.
The deeper Paul Weyer went into his study, the more the results became worrying. He showed that the longer women breastfed their child, the higher the concentration of perfluorinated compounds increased in the baby's blood.
Here's one which just a short breastfeeding story. And there the concentration is only 5.3. Let's take the person with the longest duration of 12 months. 12 months of exclusive breastfeeding, that person, the first person here. Let's go in here and find what the concentration of PFC was in the blood of the child. That was 10.1. That is in the high level.
These results are concerning, as the immune system is very vulnerable in the first few months of life. 4 years ago, Paul Weyer conducted a study looking at children and PFCs, and indeed showed a strong effect on the organism's defense mechanisms.
We saw for every doubling of PFC at the age of 5, there was a reduction with 50% of the antibody formation at the age 7. We don't know really what that means, but it could be from infectious diseases to, in the worst case scenario, to cancer and autoimmune diseases.
This study was alarming to the mothers on the island, because here breastfeeding is a religion. 97% of mothers breastfeed their child. Jonrit Halling breastfed her 2 sons for a year. But for her 3rd child, who is on its way, she's almost sure that she won't do the same.
I could not have done it in another way back then because I didn't knew better. But now I think for my next child, I will think about how long I'm going to breastfeed, the duration. At least 4 months, I think. Maybe half year, but not longer.
A few years ago, Jonrit Halling was able to have a blood test in order to know her levels of PFC, because she's a scientist and was working on a study on the subject. We could all have this test, but it is expensive because it is only conducted in specialized laboratories. Jonrit Halling was not surprised to discover that she was contaminated, probably alongside all mothers on the planet. Since then, PFCs have put into question the benefits of breastfeeding.
I think it's a shame because it's, of course, breastfeeding is the most natural thing, and it is still, I think, the best for your baby. And as an individual, it's very hard to do anything to avoid this exposure. And also, if you buy clothes and shoes for children, it's very difficult to avoid.
Difficult, but not impossible. Five years ago, Adidas was strongly rebuked by Greenpeace. Through an international campaign named Detox, the ecologists attempted to force both Adidas and Nike from using dangerous chemicals, including PFCs. At the headquarters of Adidas in Germany, you won't find anybody who will tell you that it was this campaign that led to the brand changing its products. But, after all, does it really matter? The group was the first to attack the use of PFCs. That earned them a quick visit. Steve Richardson has set himself the challenge of having a 99% PFC-free range by the 31st of December 2017. He's already working on it.
The vast majority of Adidas product, over 90%, do not contain PFCs. It's product like these outdoor garments, which can be used as a performance T-shirt, things like our football jerseys, or uniforms for sports like wrestling or tennis don't contain PFCs.
But a part of the range, like weatherproof jackets, ski garments or swimming costumes, are still posing a problem for him. With these products that are sometimes in permanent contact with water, leaving out PFCs makes them much less effective.
We built these jackets with half PFC-free material and half PFC material so we could compare the functionality in the same conditions. And we had our athletes wear those out in the rain, and this can show a little bit of what we saw. When we spray water onto the PFC-free side, it starts to penetrate in and actually wick into the fabric very quickly. Whereas on this side, still containing PFCs, the water beads on the surface for a much longer time. It's very difficult to find a replacement that works. So that's why we've engaged with the chemical industry and even collaborated with other apparel brands to try to find solutions that can work for our consumers.
The majority of industrialists have not yet bothered to conduct these long and expensive research projects. During my filming, Greenpeace received the results of their samples, and the search for perfluorated compounds was unfortunately very fruitful. Out of 40 products, only 4 didn't contain any.
These have been analyzed. This is a pant bought in Russia, and we found PFOA in really high concentration, so 12 microgram per square meter fabric. That's a lot, because we say it should not be more than 1.
For a number of years now, a few countries have called for a definitive ban on PFOA. To get around this future ban, industrialists have already replaced it with other perfluorated compounds, whilst assuring that these ones are not dangerous. There is still a long but necessary battle ahead to rid the planet of this authorized toxic companion.